I'm Liz Faublas, and this is Currents. Words of praise from 2 U.S. bishops for a vice presidential hopeful. Plus, closure for families of loved ones who died too young.
Families who have lost a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth, they are still grieving. They mourn the loss of that beloved child.
And the church in China in the past and the present. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. A great public servant. That's what U.S. Bishops' Conference President Cardinal Timothy Dolan says of presumptive vice presidential nominee Paul Ryan. According to National Review, Dolan spoke about Ryan during his weekly show on Sirius Satellite Radio. Cardinal Dolan said he and Congressman Ryan go way back and that he considers Ryan a friend. The congressman represents Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District, and before coming to New York, Dolan was Archbishop of Milwaukee. Cardinal Dolan referred to a good heated conversation he and Ryan had on the congressman's budget plan, which critics say unfairly targets programs designed to help the poor. Dolan said Ryan defended his plan, saying no one suffers more from runaway deficits than the poor. The cardinal said he applauded Ryan's call for financial accountability and restraint and a balanced budget, and the congressman's obvious solicitude for the poor. When discussing Ryan, Cardinal Dolan made clear that he was speaking personally and, quote, not from a partisan point of view. Meanwhile, another bishop from Ryan's home state has also offered kind words about the presidential hopeful. In his weekly column, Madison Bishop Robert Morlino says the congressman is aware of Catholic social teaching and is careful to form conclusions based on that teaching. Morlino, who is the bishop of Ryan's home diocese, also made clear that he was not endorsing Ryan. And when Ryan was first announced as Mitt Romney's running mate, one group was quick to praise that move. The Catholic Association said Romney made a, quote, an excellent choice. And I had a chance to talk last week with Catholic Association senior fellow Ashley McGuire. And you guys are saying, we believe Governor Romney has made an excellent choice in Paul Ryan. Now, that's quite a vote of confidence. Were you surprised at all by that choice?
You know, I think in the couple of days leading up to the announcement, there was a lot of buzz that it was going to be the congressman. So, and he was actually on the short list that we had heard of. So it wasn't a complete surprise, though I think it was a little bit of a wild card. But again, as our statement said, he, in our view, was an excellent choice.
And you also say that Congressman Ryan's concerns are very valid when it comes to how he addresses the poor amid so-called out-of-control deficit spending. Now, you know that is his Paul Ryan budget. That's what he's famous for. But it's also proposed steep cuts to food stamps, health care for children and the disabled. And it's also raised some eyebrows with the church. What is your feeling about that?
Well, you know, the Catholic Association, we don't really take a position on issues as specific as that. I think, you know, there's different views among Catholics about just how effective his budget would be. One thing that he really got our vote of confidence on, though, is where he will stand on important issues like life issues, conscience rights, things like that, things that are really what motivate the Catholic Association and our supporters.
And he has shown that he's been very much in line with very important social teachings. He opposes legal abortion in all circumstances except when the life of the mother is at risk. He's certainly not a favorite with Planned Parenthood. Their action fund gave Ryan the lowest rating possible for his votes to defund the organization. I mean, he has a strong record of votes to affirm legal marriage as between man and woman. Is he good enough, you think, to get a sizable backing of Catholics in November based on all this criteria?
You know, again, I think Catholics are, you know, all over the map on some of these issues, but I think that one thing as of recent that's really been motivating Catholics in the Catholic vote is this Health and Human Services mandate. I think a lot of Catholics view the way the government has been handling that issue as bullying of their church, of their leaders, people like Cardinal Dolan, and I think Catholics are confident that he will stand up for conscience rights, for religious freedom rights, which is something that's really on their minds lately.
And you guys did a survey back in June where you also found that that mandate is a losing issue with key constituencies like Catholics, independents, and women. We're now in August. Have you found any changes to that data?
You know, we're probably going to be conducting new data now that we have the vice presidential choice. So we don't have super fresh data, anything particularly different than that. However, other data that has been coming out continues to suggest that the issue, the HHS issue, has been a net loser for Barack Obama with Catholics and with women. And if you were to ask me now, I would suspect that that is only going to be the case, continued, if not more now, the fact that the August 1st marked the date that the mandate went into effect.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley, I really want your opinion on this. Do you think that Ryan's presence on the ticket now increases Mitt Romney's appeal among like middle of the road Catholic voters? Because do you believe his Mormonism has been a factor in your opinion?
Oh, Mitt Romney's Mormonism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I really think that the thing that Catholics care about right now is the thing that's at the front of pretty much everybody's mind, which is the economy. So only time will tell how it affects the vote. I think, Paul Ryan was clearly a strategic choice when it comes to the economy. It really solidifies the fact that this is an issue that Mitt Romney cares about. And frankly, I think Catholics have seen that Mitt Romney, despite being a Mormon, is standing up for Catholics. When we saw him on the stump a couple weeks ago in Ohio, a swing state, saying, when he was asked specifically about the HHS mandate, he said, "I feel today we're all Catholics." And he got a huge standing ovation. I think that things like that really get him a vote of confidence with Catholics.
I do remember that speech, and I also want to bring up the fact that you have said that Ryan is a Catholic who believes that faith, including his own, has a rightful place in the public square. And you say that we believe he can help restore fundamental liberties to our nation. How do you think he can go about doing that?
Well, again, I think that he's shown himself to be a consistent supporter of conscience rights, of religious freedom, and that, for us, we really see that unless the administration fundamentally changes or rescinds the mandate, it's going to require an administration change to see that HHS mandate rolled back and religious freedom restored. And I think we're very confident that Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney would do that together.
Ashley, what is your organization doing to get the word out about the importance of the mandate? You obviously think that tensions between the administration and the Catholic Church over this controversial rule will probably help frame the election with regard to the Catholic vote.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that the campaign is taking note of this as well. Just a couple days ago, Mitt Romney released a video, an ad that was targeting this specific issue. So things that we're doing, we're really encouraging. We have a huge base of activists who are really upset about this mandate. We've been encouraging them to do different things, whether it's to call their congressmen or things more on the spiritual side. We have a huge Facebook base of over 100,000 people. So we're using social media to keep people informed of what's going on. For example, one of our big campaigns has been to make sure that people are aware of the fact that the mandate that took effect on August 1st was the original mandate that the Obama administration proposed, not what people are referring to as the compromise. So we've been doing things like that, just keeping people informed of the development of this issue, as well as different ways that they can, at a grassroots level, affect it.
All right, Ashley, thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have. And I should mention before we go, as it stands, no presidential candidate has won the White House without winning Catholics since at least the early 1990s. So that kind of puts into perspective the importance of the Catholic vote. Thank you so much for joining us and helping put this all in perspective as well.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. President Obama and Mitt Romney open up on the topic of faith in the public square. We'll have that and more of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. The separation of church and state has been taken too far. That's Mitt Romney's opinion on the issue. The Republican presidential candidate believes that some Americans have taken the church-state separation well beyond its original meaning. In an interview with Cathedral Age, the magazine of Washington's National Cathedral, Romney stated that those who, quote, seek to remove from the public domain any acknowledgement of God aren't acting in line with the founder's intent. Romney, who is Mormon, also stated that, quote, "I am often asked about my faith and my beliefs about Jesus Christ. I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of mankind." In a separate interview with Cathedral Age, President Obama called faith a powerful force for good. According to the Huffington Post, he stopped short of suggesting faith's influence has been forcibly diminished in recent years. In other news, a vigil for liberty in the Diocese of Charlotte is planned to coincide with the Democratic National Convention. St. Patrick Cathedral in Charlotte is creating a period of continuous Eucharistic adoration from Monday to Thursday, September 3rd through the 6th. The focus of the prayers will be on petitions for the U.S., its leaders, and everyone in atonement for sins and the future of the nation. The cathedral is currently asking for volunteers to pray during the vigil. From Oregon, a judge has ruled that the Vatican is not the employer of priests. The case was an attempt by plaintiffs to hold the Vatican financially accountable in cases of priests accused of sexual abuse. The judge ruled that, quote, "There are no facts to create a true employment relationship between a priest in question and the Holy See." The lawyer in the case has a history of suing Catholic dioceses in priest abuse cases. He has also previously attempted to make the Vatican financially accountable in individual abuse cases. In Nigeria's troubled northeast, continued violence. Gunmen in the region attacked a Catholic church and a police station and blew up part of a primary school. Separately, 2 gunmen riding on motorcycles opened fire on troops at a military checkpoint in the northern city of Kano on Sunday, injuring a soldier, according to a military spokesman. There were no reported casualties from any of these incidents, and it is not clear who was responsible for the attacks, but they resemble those carried out by Islamist group Boko Haram. The group, blamed for more than 1,400 deaths in Nigeria since 2010, repeatedly targets security services, churches, and other symbols of authority. Nigeria is divided between a mainly Muslim north and predominantly Christian south. Well, you feeling charitable? If you are among middle-class Americans, chances are you donate more to charity compared to the rich. That's according to a new study by the Chronicle of Philanthropy, in which the group compared charitable contributions to household income. Here's the breakdown. On average, households that earned between $50,000 and $75,000 for the year donated more than 7% of their discretionary income to charity. Meanwhile, people who made $100,000 or more gave away just over 4%. Data found that religion, a person's zip code, political party affiliation, and tax incentives impact one's generosity. The findings are based on 2008 IRS records. Well, how's this for charity? Joseph Mitchell died in October 2011. He was a member of the Cathedral of Christ the King in the Archdiocese of Atlanta and asked that, if possible, his inheritance assist the cathedral in a particular way. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, as the nephew of Margaret Mitchell, author of Gone with the Wind, that meant a substantial gift that includes a 50% share of the trademark and literary rights to Gone with the Wind and a multi-million-dollar bequest. Atlanta Archbishop Wilton Gregory has designated that $7.5 million from the estate be given to the Cathedral of Christ the King for its building fund, $1.5 million to Catholic Charities Atlanta, and an additional $2 million to create an endowment fund for Catholic Charities to address its long-term need for sustaining income. And additionally, Joseph Mitchell donated property to the Archdiocese, which plans to build a new residence for Archbishop Gregory and future Atlanta archbishops. Archbishop Gregory said the Mitchell family has a proud Catholic legacy, and this gift will allow that legacy and that pride to be shared with many others in the Archdiocese. Stay tuned. There's a lot more currents ahead. Coming up, a rocky road for the church in China. Welcome back. It's been a rough road for the church in China. The Vatican has been at odds with the country's government over the issue of religious freedom in that country. The Chinese government has in place the Catholic Patriotic Association, an organization that is not approved by the Holy See. Catholics in communion with Rome are forced into what is known as the underground church, whose members, as the name implies, are not allowed to worship freely. Rome Reports has more on the situation for the church in China.
The situation of the Catholic Church in China is quite complicated. The communist regime wants to control the religious practice of the church, which includes appointing the bishops of its choice without the consent of the Pope. So really, the church is divided in two. One that's described as the so-called patriotic church, and the other is the underground church that remains loyal to the Pope. It's never been easy to name Chinese bishops. The first were ordained back in 1926 at the Vatican, when the first papal representative, Celso Constantini, was assigned to that country. He was the first papal delegate in China, who actually opened the first missionary project of its kind. While Constantini worked in China, the first 6 Chinese bishops were ordained.
Up until then, the Catholic Church in China was simply seen as a spiritual reality, but it was still protected by international powers, especially France. When Constantini was the apostolic delegate, he presented the Church as a spiritual reality that wants the very best for the Chinese, but it also demonstrated that it was above partisan politics. It was he who established the Church in China, which makes him the main evangelizer of the Church there. It's an issue that is still very interesting in church-state relations.
He worked in China for 13 years, and even so, to this day, his work is still remembered, thanks in large part to the Friend Association of Cardinal Constantini.
The association I have the honor of representing deals with promoting the teachings of Cardinal Celso Costantini, who died in 1958. He was a key figure who left his footprints in the world of art, culture, and the Church. He worked a lot, and really all his work deserves to be published. Costantini looks forward to the third millennium, which is why his work is still relevant. He shaped projects that can be applied currently.
So today, despite the challenges of the Catholic Church in China, the work of Cardinal Constantini manages to shine through, especially since he led the way in helping establish the Church in China in more ways than one, including bringing bishops to Rome for their ordination.
Stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, a massive remembrance for stillborn babies.
The death of these newborn infants that are abandoned sometimes, that are left in undescribed areas, and or where families cannot afford to bury a child.
Welcome back. Earlier this year, a first for a Staten Island couple, a birth certificate for their son who was born in 2007. Why the long wait? Well, because their baby boy was stillborn. Until late March, New York State did not issue birth certificates for stillborn babies. The couple fought to get that changed, and last year, New York became the 32nd state to pass the Missing Angels Bill into law. It went into effect in March. One of the main proponents of the measure is the Arizona-based Miss Foundation, which provides support to grieving families and works to reduce the number of infant and toddler deaths. And a legislative advocate for the Miss Foundation was one of the driving forces behind a mass for stillborn children, many of whom are buried on Hart Island in the Long Island Sound. The mass took place earlier this month at the Church of the Holy Innocents in Manhattan.
The Mass is important to me because I want the public to know about the 700,000 babies that are buried on Hart Island, and that no official Mass services have ever been said for them. And my sister is among them. She was stillborn in 1942. So the Mass essentially was for her and for all the babies that are over there in the island.
The families who have lost a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth, they are still grieving. They mourn the loss of that beloved child. And so somehow we want to bring a closer to them and bring comfort and consolation. That is really the ministry that we are doing.
I was overcome with emotions that I thought that I pretty much had hidden, that she has recognition now from the church that her life, her time here didn't matter.
What this Mass is to try to do is to recognize and bring to the public's awareness the death of these newborn infants that are abandoned sometimes, that are left in undescribed areas, and or where families cannot afford to bury a child.
The Mass is also important because we want people to know through this Mass that New York State has passed new legislation creating stillbirth certificates, so that if any mother's had a stillborn, they can apply for a certificate. It's basically documentation and for these babies.
I think it gave them a better understanding of the unborns. A lot of the times when we think of an unborn child, we don't actually see someone so formed, someone that has a family, that has a community.
We are truly honoring all the children who have lost a life right to live among us. We promote life, and in the culture of death we live in, we need to hold fast to the life entrusted to us, and we try to nurture our own life, enrich it through caring for the unborn.
And that is all for tonight. Be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net, and we are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublas. We leave you with scenes from Spain 1 year ago, World Youth Day. Thank you for watching, and have a good night.